Okay, perfect. So I will begin. I'm going to be starting from the beginning today, and then I'm going to take over my usual in about an hour again. So I wanted to cover two things today. One thing somebody asked in the channel about in the Slack group about the various career options. I'm not sure if she's on right now, but I guess you can watch it after, and I think this will be beneficial for everyone. Instead of going to very specific JavaScript stuff, I'm just going to go over some general things as we're nearing the end of the course. What some of the career options are for, for getting into tech, and what the different roles are, etc. So first of all, I did go through some of this in the webinar I gave. So I'm just going to go ahead and share this on the group, and you can watch it whenever. But I'll just go over some of it right now. Vremel cannot see me. Not sure why. Can anyone else see me? Can you hear me at least? Okay, so perfect. So what are some of the roles in a tech company? Or I guess more specifically, where can you go from here with what you know? Where can you go from here? So a few things. First of all, again, obviously everybody's in a different situation. Some people are going to be trying to look for a full-time role after this. Maybe some people already work for a company and they're just trying to learn some tech skills. Maybe some people have a family, some people are single. Everybody's in a different situation. And again, feel free to reach out to me if you have specific questions. I'll try and help. But let's say you know the basics now, and now you're like, okay, I want to try and go find a job. So I have to be fully honest and say that with just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you're probably not going to be able to just get a job right away. Your first job is going to be the hardest, but then from there it gets much, much easier. So you have to weather through that initial storm. There are various options. First of all, you can start, again, depending on your financial situation and your familial situation, you can potentially start as like an intern. Maybe there's somebody you know in the community that has some work that they can give you, and you start with some very basic work as an intern, and then you slowly grow from there. The key is to get yourself in the door as far as getting a job. But there's some other interesting things as well, which is that, number one, things like freelancing are very big in the tech space. So, maybe you have a bunch of friends with Shopify stores, or, some sort of other e-commerce store, or in general websites, and maybe they need, a little front-end work done here and there. You can get those jobs even with just the experience that you have, and maybe plus a little bit more. Hey, I need to customize this button on my site. I need to make a pop-up here when they come to this part of the site. That's how you start. So that's another thing to think about. You don't always have to think about, hey, how can I go and get a full-time job at Google right now, right? That's not realistic where you are in your current part of your journey. But things like doing jobs for people, customizations on sites is very much realistic. And that's step one. That gives you experience. That gives you stuff on your resume. So that's all very good stuff to think about. That's as far as more of your steps from here. So if you're looking, so again, it really depends on your personal situation. But I think one thing to keep in mind, again, is freelancing, the fact that it's an option. Contract work is an option. Reach out to your network, see if they have any work for you, and reach out to me if I can be of help. But let me just go over more in general what some of the different options are with technical skills. So there's the general one, and I posted this video on the chat. Did I? Yes, I just posted the video on the chat where I go through some of this. There's the concept of being a programmer, a developer, right? You'll build stuff. And with, oh, somebody's raising their hand now. And now in that itself, in being a programmer itself, there's various levels, right? There's a programmer that's building complex search algorithms for Google for what happens when you search. That's one type of programmer. There's a programmer that's building the front ends for COL Live. There's a programmer that's building the logic that goes into your smart thermostat that connects to your Wi-Fi. So everybody's a programmer, everybody's a developer, but they focus on different parts. Sometimes programmers are split up into like back-end developer, front-end developer, back-end engineer, front-end engineer. What we've been focusing on until now is really just front-end stuff. Again, JavaScript can also be used on the server, so it's good to know even if you want to get into the back-end stuff. I guess unfortunately there wasn't really enough time to get deep into the back-end, but JavaScript can be used on the back-end. So there's that one thing, right? There's a programmer, developer, you can build websites, you can program stuff, etc. Then, in that itself, there's also another role, which is kind of like, sometimes it's called tech ops, operations, DevOps, developer operations, and that's basically the people that write the code that deals with keeping servers up. At Google, they call these people site reliability engineers. But they're basically the people that write the code that is involved in deploying the servers, deploying the code, managing the code in the cloud, managing various other resources like the image, CDNs. I'm not going to get into all this right now, but that's kind of another role. Sometimes they're referred to as an infrastructure engineer, operations person, DevOps. That's kind of all. They're kind of a programmer, but they more deal with like the servers and the infrastructure level stuff, the services that the other programmers use. So they might like configure a database so that, again, this is more at bigger companies. At smaller companies, a programmer will probably just do all of this. It's not as complex at a smaller company. There's a lot of tools that will help you do a lot of this very easily. But either way, yeah, so that's another one. Then I'm back to the front end for a second. There's the whole design element. So there's, I mentioned in my webinar, but the differences between front-end developers and designers and UX people, user experience people, is very much that gap is lessening and shortening a lot, because there's a lot of new cool tools that basically allow you to design in like a Photoshop or Figma-like tool and then export code, front-end code, straight from that. So that's another element. You can be a designer or a user experience, whatever they're called, engineer or UX designer or developer or whatever. So that's another whole element. And maybe you have kind of, in general, a drawing towards, no pun intended, a drawing towards the design of the UX side of things. And now understanding the front-end code will make you a much better UX designer and developer as well. So that's another thing to think about. So if some of you already know a lot of Photoshop, maybe learning one of these tools like, I don't know, Figma I know lets you export CSS, I think. I'm not so familiar with all these tools. There's a tool called Webflow, which allows you to design and basically just export code. It's like they call it like a low-code tool. Anyway, that's on like the developer front-end web element. Then there's another element which we didn't get to that much, but that's the data side of things. That is that companies, right, so let's say you have a Facebook or a Google, you have the developers that write the code for what happens when you go to the site or you make a search, you do all this stuff. But then what happens is they're writing all this stuff to the database, and now there's mountains and mountains of data about people, about subjects, about whatever. So then you have people whose goal and focus is just to deal with the data side of the company. They use tools like Excel, SQL. Some of you are probably familiar with SQL. Most are probably familiar with Excel or Google Sheets. And there's a tool called R, which is also like a scripting language for dealing with data. And that's also, I think, a very good career path, especially for people that don't. The programming side could, I'm not going to say it's stressful, but it can be. Sometimes you get very caught up in it, and you get stuck on a very specific problem. So some people love that. I personally have found myself to enjoy that very much. but some people would rather a more relaxed type of role. And I think the data side, going slightly more in that direction, could be a little bit more relaxed, because you're not dealing with, hey, what are users experiencing right now? Uh-oh, there's a bug, I need to fix the bug right now. Instead, you're dealing with after the fact, there's data, and now we got to crunch it and do some stuff with it, create reports for the business people to analyze it. So the data side is interesting as well. And there, your primary tools would be like SQL and Excel. Now, here's another one, and the next one is kind of important because it could be your ticket into a company, and that is QA, quality assurance. I know multiple people that started when they were trying to get their first job. It's hard to just get a programming job right away, because it's a little risky to just let anyone write code, because technically, you know how it is. You have one extra semicolon, maybe not a semicolon, but you forget to do a break in your loop, and then you have an infinite loop, and then you destroy the whole program. So you do have to be a little bit careful, and that's why the first job is a little bit difficult to get. But once you're in, it gets a lot easier. But either way, the way some people I know have broken in is by starting in the QA route, the quality assurance route. And what does that mean? What do you do as a QA person? So there's basically two levels of QA. There's the QA where you literally go and test every element of the code. You go in and you manually try out every feature, and you maybe learn a little bit of SQL so you can check in the database if, hey, I registered a member, registered a new user on the site, did it work properly, did all the fields save properly? So that is one level of QA. And again, in that itself, there's different levels. You learn how to use all the features and how to test them and understand the technicals of each feature. Then, maybe you learn very light SQL so you can also test it in the database. But then there's another level of QA, which are the people, they call them either automation engineer or automation QA or whatever. And those people will write code, they'll write scripts and stuff to actually go and test the code automatically. So instead of me having to go and try to register a new user every time the code is updated or changed, I can just write scripts that will go ahead and test it, and it will check, hey, was the response correct, etc. They'll write these scripts to do that. So that's in the QA side, and again, it could be good to know about this because it's possible that this is a good way to break in and get your first job, to start on the QA, the quality assurance side. I see Sorrell's here. Let me just see if there's any other important ones to get to. I can continue this when I come back at around 9. I also had one thing I was going to show. I was going to debug something live for you, but I can do that in the next class. Anyway, all right. Yisrael, take it from here.
All right, thank you very much. Testing, testing. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. All right. Okay, so as camp comes to an end, we're going to start wrapping a few things up here and have a quick overview of some of the things that we're not going to go in great depth, but we're going to learn a little bit about where to go from here, how you guys can look up more information and learn about these things and play around with them, test them yourself. So the first thing I want to look into is how your web page, your website connects to the server, to the back end, so to speak. These fancy words that you hear sometimes, front end, back end, server side, client side. So all that means basically is from this end of the internet or that end of the internet. And what I mean by that is, let's open up again our little amateur graphic from how the internet works. Okay, here we go. So yeah, the internet is basically just computers trying to connect to each other. That's all that it is. There's a bunch of wires, or as someone famously said, the internet is a series of tubes that connect basically between one computer and another computer. And that's pretty much all that it is. When you're typing into the browser a web address like facebook.com or google.com or whatever, what you're doing is you're sending a message out there saying, hey, get me this information that is at this web address. And that message is traveling out there through the wires, going through a few different stages, and finally it's going to reach another computer out there on the internet, which is called a server, and that server is specifically waiting around, waiting to hear for people, ask him for stuff like that, and then he prepares the response for you, the stuff, the data that you want to get, which could be an HTML page, or it could be an image, a JPEG, it could be other things, could be an audio file or a video or something. And then it responds to you, and it goes all the way back over the wires. It sends back to you to get all the contents of the response that you want to get. So that's also some of these terms that you guys are going to hear, this idea of request and response. What does it mean, request and response? Request is basically when I type into the browser facebook.com, I am sending a request out there, please get me facebook.com. And then when finally a computer out there, a server out there responds to my request and prepares for me an HTML page which has facebook.com, that is called a response. The language that they're talking between them is called HTTP, which is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It's just this kind of language, which is basically the idea is that it's a relationship between two different computers over the internet. And the relationship is, I'm going to ask you for stuff and you provide them to me. There are other kinds of relationships that happen over the internet, such as, for example, a VoIP relationship, which is we are both going to connect over fast speed audio channels, and we're going to receive and get and exchange both ways on a two-way highway stuff. But here specifically, it's like request, response. And it has some specifics to it, which makes a difference. For example, in HTTP, there's an order to things. First, I send you a request. Then I wait around for the answer, and I could wait. And sometimes you could be loading a page, and it takes a few seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds. Sometimes you get an error message that says your request timed out, which basically means that it took too long and he's not responding. So we're going to give up at this point because we're not going to wait forever. And then the other computer, the other server at the other end of your request should be answering, should be responding to you. And it happens that in that kind of order. Please give me this, here is this. Please give me that, here is that. You put a request out there and you get back a response. So basically, if we want to call this in terms of like who is the customer here and who is the seller here, I guess, at any point in time, if it's your mobile device that you're browsing on the internet something, or you're sending someone a message, or if it's your laptop or your computer, and you are going out there asking for something, then you are considered the client. You're considered you're at the front end, so to speak. You are looking at the things the way it's supposed to be for everyday people, people that don't understand all the details of the internet. It's supposed to look nice. It's supposed to be understandable. It's supposed to be user-friendly, because you're the client. You're at the front end. So you expect to see graphic buttons and interfaces that you understand and that you can work with. And then the person that is behind the scenes that is getting your request and is serving you is perhaps considered the seller, or in this case, it's called a server, or it's also called a back end. That's on the other side of the internet, where all of the technicalities and all the development stuff and the programming stuff and all the coding stuff, that's where it all begins from. That's where all the information comes from, and that's where they do all the logic and calculations. Are you logged in? Is this your user? Do you need to did you put in the right username and password? Are you looking up an order? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to browse, etc., etc.? Is there an error that happened? All that complicated behind the scenes stuff happens at the back end on the server side. So you, with your human device, like a laptop or a mobile device, you're the client. You're at the front end, and you're placing requests on the internet, which is going through the wires all the way out there, getting stuff from the back end, from the server side. And that's basically what that whole idea means. Now, also, so far, all the stuff that we've learned and we've programmed, everything that we've done so far, we've done HTML, which makes the structure of your page. We've done CSS, which styles the appearance of your page. We've done JavaScript, which messes around and changes and adds and removes things into your page. all of that so far has been happening on the client side. All that has been happening basically on your device in the browser. Your browser is basically your user agent. It's your the guy at the front desk getting stuff for you and showing it to you. That's what your browser is. So when you type in google.com, you're not expected to know any technicalities or development stuff. You just know that if you type in google.com, you should see a nice graphical interface of the Google website. And if you search for something like colors, I don't know what, you know, you're expecting to see images and things you can click and things that are intuitive. This is all HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that's happening on the client side in our browser. We could see the HTML is right over here. You can inspect it. What's going on here? Full screen mode. Okay. This. All right. So yeah, the HTML is all of these items over here, all of these elements. They're all, you know, this is an image tag. This is a div over here. These are, all of these things are, you know, links and LIs and tables and all sorts of things like that. That's the HTML. The CSS is, you know, the fact that this appears in this kind of way, and this has rounded edges over here. You know, this, I'll bet you this is a border radius that they did over there. Let me confirm that. Sometimes it's hard to see because, let's see if they have it here. Border radius. Here we go. Border radius, 18 pixels. If I reduce this, the rounded edges become less rounded, and now suddenly they have square edges, and they're no more rounded anymore. But if I put that back where it was, then they have back to the rounded edges, right? Okay, so this is the CSS that's styling your page and make it appear in different ways. And then there's JavaScript. JavaScript is anything that's alive or moving or happening on your page, such as, for example, if I click on this arrow, it keeps scrolling on to the next set of suggested results over there. And if I scroll down here and I open up some of these suggested things over here by the little arrow, it expands and it collapses, and the next one expands and collapses as I click on it. That's JavaScript. All of this is happening in the front end of things in my browser on my device that I could look at and that I can see. Now, what's going on the back end? Where's all this coming from? This is all coming out of a server. So to break into this just a little bit, so we have a bit of an overview about all that and how you guys can get your feet wet with that. Let's start small. First of all, with the concept that let's start with this. When you type in google.com, okay, let's inspect the request for a minute. Go to the network tab. Refresh the page, go to the first request that we placed, and we see over here the technicalities about it. We requested to go to google.com. We sent the HTTP GET request. It ended up going to this web address, and it has a whole bunch of other details and specifics about it, stuff that we requested, and stuff that came back as the answer, as the response. And you could, you know, see the technical HTML that came through the internet back to our browser. So this is kind of like the basic way how to use the internet, is kind of to just put a link in the address bar, like google.com, and you browse to there. And then maybe you find a link, like let's say this about link over here in the top corner, and I click on it, and it brings me to some other link, like about.google / something or other. And then from here, maybe I could click on some other things, like commitments. And you know, you click and you go from one link to another, to another, to another. And this is how you browse the internet, and you go from one page to another. Each time you're sending another request out there, hey, give me this page now. And some server out there in the world says, oh, sure, here goes your page. And then you click on something else. Oh, give me this other page. In this case, actually, it didn't browse to a different page. It just scrolled me down with JavaScript further down the page, which is a very nice effect. And this brought me to another page, etc., etc. So this is kind of like the basic way how to browse the internet, is by putting things in the URL, in the address bar, and clicking on links. This was the basic initial way how the internet worked. At some point down the line, though, guys thought, hey, isn't this neat that you could ask things from the internet and get them? And so far, we've been using that only in terms of getting a page. Asking for a page and give me a page. Asking for a JavaScript file, give me a JavaScript file. Ask for a CSS file, get the CSS file. But what if I'm in a page already? And while I'm on the page, I want to get some updated information. Okay, let's look at some stocks, for example. Where could we see an example of watching stocks? I have no idea about these things. Watch Dow live. Okay, so let's say you're watching this chart over here. Okay, you're watching the stocks, and you actually want to see what's the next number, what's the next tick at the next. Oh, someone's suggesting marketwatch.com. Let's try that out. Why not? Marketwatch.com. Okay, nice. Does this tick live? Is there a website where there's a good example of it showing you ticking live? Oh, live. Very good. Okay, cool. So here we are. I landed on the page, and the HTML showed me, you know, this table with these columns and these charts and these numbers. And that's it. Technically, based on what we know, this is what it is. This is the information we have. You want to have more new information, stuff that's new? Well, then I guess you got to browse to the page. Just like we browsed here to begin with, and we got the information that we got now at this point in time. So if I go and I refresh the page, I hit F5 or I click on the refresh button, then it's going to tell me, oh, okay, 10 seconds later, this is what the numbers are now. 15 seconds later, now I have to refresh the page and do it again. 1 minute later, 2 minutes later, 3 minutes later, each time I want to see what's the latest updated information, I got to hit refresh again and see what's the next number coming in. But some people thought, wouldn't it be cool if you didn't have to keep refreshing the page all over again, which loads a whole lot of HTML and all the JavaScript files that we need for this page and a whole bunch of CSS each time all over again, which for thousands of people on the internet browsing to a website, it could add up to quite a bit of bandwidth and using up, you know, megabits and gigabits over the internet and kind of like using up resources, hogging up the processing power of the servers. Wouldn't it be cool if you got the page, you have the page, keep the page, stay on the page, and while you're on the page, you could still ask for a little bit of information, like, hey, server, don't give me the whole page all over again. Give me just the latest number that just came in for the last 15 seconds. And then 30 seconds later, ask the server again, hey, give me just the next number. That's it. And then with JavaScript, since we know JavaScript can already mess around and change everything you want on the page, JavaScript will take that information, whatever it gets from the backend, from the server, and stuff it into what we're looking at over here and update the numbers. And magically, as you're looking at it, you're seeing tick, tick. This isn't live enough for me. Do we have something more live than this? Sorry about all the articles on the bottom. I'm trying not to even pay attention to that. I was hoping to get some sort of example of a page where you see something live ticking. If anyone was investing in what's it called, Bitcoin lately, maybe you've been using Coinbase or something like that. I wonder if we can even watch it. Let's see, can we watch it? View exchange. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Excellent. This is ticking live. And this is living proof of the fact that initially, when you load a page, when you load up a website, it is what it is. The HTML that you put there, that's the stuff that's there, and that's it. It's not necessarily going to change or move. So then we learned, oh, but with JavaScript and with jQuery, we can mess around with things, change things, make things jump around and move and come from here and go away from there and remove from here and add to there. So that's cool. But all of that is still just in your browser, in the page, without getting any new information from the server. Whatever you loaded from the server is like, bye-bye, I gave you your response. You have it, do with it whatever you want to do. You want to change things, you want to make up your own numbers, you want to invent whatever the next number in the market is going to be, or whatever the next temperature of the forecast is going to be, do it yourself on the client side. I'm done with giving you my response. And that's a bit of an issue, because what if you want to have something like this? where every second, in fact, over here, it's going so fast, it's like every split second. Every split second, you're getting some additional information from the server. The server is giving us now, hey, someone else bought for this amount, someone else sold for that amount. And it's going really, really fast. This is a very, very fast exchange happening over here, right? So it must be that, JavaScript isn't just making up these numbers just to look cool. Maybe sometimes they do that. Yeah, that's a conspiracy theory of its own. But let's imagine that this is a legit marketplace where real things are happening. How are they getting all these numbers without me refreshing the page? If right now the number is $9,104.15, right? Look, it just changed. Now it's $9,104.26, and now it's 62 cents. How is that changing if all we have is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? HTML, CSS, and JavaScript were loaded up into the browser. They're in the browser. It is what it is. Maybe at most JavaScript can try to do a few things or change a few numbers with some functions you created, or you put it some jQuery to like change the text or change the number. But if this is supposed to be real legitimate information, then it must be that your computer, your website, your browser is right now getting new information every second, every split second from the servers out there in the world over the internet, getting that information from there. So how does it do that without refreshing the page? We know that if you type the address in the address bar and you click enter, and it does a whole entire page load that loads the entire website all over again from out there on the internet. Well, it's a whole entire page load, but at least we know it got some up-to-date information from out there on the internet, because it had to go out there to the server to get the page, right? But while we're sitting on the page and we're here watching it, how does it happen? How does this work that that he has legitimate new information from the server coming in? I didn't refresh the page now. I didn't ask the server, hey, give me some more information, give me some more information. I didn't do that now. I'm on the page. I'm just sitting here. How are we getting all of this new information? How does a news ticker work? How does a live weather forecast application work? Where you sit on the web page, you have just whatever HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is there, and somehow it gets new information as you sit and wait over there. How does that work without reloading the page? So the answer is that there is a trick how you could do this in JavaScript, and jQuery also has some useful things that makes it easier for us to use, where you could tell the browser, while staying on this page, please go get me some request out there from the internet. The same way how we said, hey, please give me facebook.com, and it loaded us an entire page. This same system we could use and say, hey, don't give me a whole entire page, just ask the server to give me this piece of information, which the server already prepared in advance, that he's ready and awaiting and expecting people to ask him for the specific piece of information. So sometimes you ask the server, hey, give me a whole page. And sometimes you ask the server, give me a tiny piece of information. Usually, nowadays, the modern, cool, nice-looking web pages, they work in this kind of way, where to begin with, you ask the server, okay, load up the page to begin with. And then once you have the page, you sent already your HTTP request, you got already the entire HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript. In the JavaScript that you got when you first loaded the page, some of the functions over there, some of the code that was written up when you first load up the page includes instructions such as every 30 seconds, go and fetch me something else from the server. Don't get me the whole entire page again. I want to stay with this page. I don't want to tear it down and reload the whole thing from scratch. Stay on the page, and from JavaScript, go get me one little request. I'm going to send the HTTP get, not of facebook.com, but maybe of something like facebook.com/data/single tick update or something like that. And what the server is going to respond to you is not going to be necessarily an entire HTML page. It's going to be something like text/JSON or something like that, application/JSON, which is a certain kind of data format that is just pieces of information, like a list of 10 numbers or a list of 50 new names and addresses, or just one single true or false, like is it ready or is it not ready, or a single percent number, like how much is it loaded already? Is it at 50%? Is it at 30%? Is it at 100%? And the server will just send you back one teeny tiny little piece of information. So let's play around with how this works. Let's open up the browser for a little bit. And let's see, first of all, let's just for fun, let's inspect over here, because we're very curious and we're wondering, how do they do this on the internet? How do they make a real website like this fetch data so quickly, so fast? So I'm going to reload the page so we can watch this. And I'm going to filter out requests by WebSocket, because I think that's how they make the data come in over here with WebSocket connections. And now, where do we see WebSocket data? I forgot how to watch this. Watch what comes back from the WebSocket channel. Not sure why it's not showing me. Let's see here. Let's look at some of these other. Hey, you see, this was just a request out there to api.amplitude.com, and it requested for something behind the scenes. It wasn't an entire web page. All it got back from the server was success. That's it. Just the word success. What else? Exceptions. Here, this guy only came back with an OK. This request over here just sent out a message on the internet and got back a little bit of JSON that says status is healthy, etc., etc. As you can see, you can request from the internet tiny little snippets of things while your page is still there. It's not loading away. It's available, ready, continuing to function. It's not going away anywhere, and you could still keep working with it, change it with JavaScript, get new pieces of information, and put them into the page. Trying to zoom out over here a bit. Now I can see it. No, I still can't see it. There used to be an easy way how to watch the contents of this data, and you could see very, very quickly. It was very cool to watch, like every split second, another request coming in, another request going down. Anyway, okay, I'll give up on that for now. But anyway, having said that, let's go to the console over here. I'm going to go to Google for test API, just so that we can mess around a little bit. How about this? JSON placeholder. Yeah, that looks feasible. Okay, so here's an example website that helps us play around with this concept. They tell us basically, oh, sure, you want to play around with this idea of like asking for little things from the internet and getting them back, just like as if you requested an entire page, except you didn't request an entire page. You requested a little piece of information and you got it back using the same kind of HTTP system. So here, use our website to play around with that. So we're going to follow their instructions over here to play around with this concept. I'm going to open up the console. I'll go to the console tab, and I'm going to copy this stuff over here. So without going into too much details, what this is doing right now is it's calling a function called fetch. In JavaScript, there exists a function called fetch. And you can put in here a link, a URL to some place on the internet, which, again, so let's understand again this difference between a link on the internet that brings you a page versus a link on the internet that brings you just a little piece of information. Usually when you browse to a page on the internet, like google.com, that gives you, you know, an HTML page with CSS, the JavaScript, and it looks pretty, it looks presentable, you know, it's a page. However, now we're going to start learning about links on the internet that exist out there. You can even browse them in your browser as if it was a page. But the thing is, they're not a page. They're a tiny little piece of information. Or sometimes they're a bunch of pieces of information. And they're not meant to be pretty. They're not meant to look like a page, which is why if you browse it like a page, it's going to look kind of technical. It's going to look wrong. It's not going to look like it's a fancy page. If you're browsing to a web page, you get an HTML page. It looks pretty. It gets CSS. If you're browsing just to a piece of information somewhere without loading an entire page, you get something very tiny, something like this. There you go. You got a little bit of what looks like a JavaScript object And it has a property called user ID, whose value is 1. It has another property called ID, whose value is also 1. It has a thing called title, whose value is this string. And it has completed false. And this is all we got by browsing on the internet to this particular link. So yeah, start getting used to this idea. Until now, we used to browse to pretty pages on the internet that give you HTML and nice, pretty things to click on and to browse from one thing to the other. Now, you're realizing, holy moly, there are like thousands and thousands and thousands, maybe even millions of other links on the internet, which you can even browse to in your browser, but they don't give you a page that has buttons and graphical things to browse around. It gives you just little pieces of information, just a little bit of data. And you can use that. You can get those little pieces of information in your web page as you're still browsing on the web page without going away to a completely separate page. How so? For one example is you could call this fetch function, and this fetch will get you that link, right? So until now, we used to browse to a page by putting the address in the address bar. Now you're starting to learn, oh, I don't even have to put the address in the address bar to get this stuff. JavaScript can do it from inside, from behind the scenes. While your web page is still functioning, your JavaScript is secretly fetching some stuff from here on the internet, fetching some stuff from there, asking this server for something, asking the other server for something, and putting it all into your page for you as you're still obliviously just watching the page itself. Nothing changed. You didn't browse away, but JavaScript got a bunch of cool things for you from behind the scenes. And after getting this thing from fetch, after calling that function with putting in that URL, what happens is it gives you back an object. That object has another function called then, which means after you finish requesting this page, it could take a few seconds. You know, browsing to something on the internet doesn't necessarily come immediately. It could take 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds. It could even time out. Or hopefully, if it succeeds, then afterwards, call the then function. And then you do this little thing over here, which takes the response that came in as a parameter. This is a parameter that goes into a function, and turn it into a JSON object. And then after you're finished with that, it gives you another object. And that object, you can do then, calling the then function on it again. And this time, we take whatever came out of the JSON, and we say, hey, why don't you go ahead and put it in the console, log it out to the console so we can watch it over here inside of the console down here. So let me just copy this verbatim, copy it from here, paste it into the JavaScript console. And I'm going to press enter to see how we request from the internet a piece of information. It's going to go all the way out to a server. It's going to get stuff. It's going to come back. We're going to have it in JavaScript, all while we're still on the same web page and we haven't browsed away. So let's watch this in action. Also, I'm going to quickly switch to the network tab, and I'm going to clear it out. It is cleared out. OK, it's empty, so we can watch and inspect and examine what happens over here with the internet, that we're sending out a request out there. It's going to a server. The server got the request. It's giving us a little response of a piece of data, and it's coming back over the internet to us, all while we're still on this web page, and we can take the information and play around with it into the page that we're currently on. So let's see this finally in action. Let's press enter. And wow, we got some different answers over here, some different responses. It all happened pretty quickly in this case. So let's go to the network tab and watch what happened here. This used to be empty before, but now it's showing us that there was a HTTP request that went out to the internet that went to this link, jsonplaceholder.typicode.com/todo/1. Okay, let me click on it and examine all the details of it. So there we go. It was a GET request that went out to the internet. It reached this server, which is at IP address 104.28.18.25. A whole bunch of other stuff that went along with on the way with it out there. And finally, when it came back with its response, which we can preview over here, it came with this JSON object, with the JavaScript object that has this name and this value, this name, this value, this name, this value. And that's what came back to us in our JavaScript. This is the raw version of what it looks like, just the plain text of what it came out from the server. And here's a little bit more compacted into a, the thing with the arrow that you can expand. but it's the same kind of thing, basically. This one is just showing it as an object in JavaScript. So because we did this in JavaScript, we have this information in JavaScript. Going back to the console over here, if you guys remember, we got that thing. We got it from the internet, and we decided put it out in the console. And that's what we have happening right over here. Over here, suddenly we see in the console, someone outputted, someone printed into the console this information. It looks like an object, and inside of it, it has this name, this value, this name, this value. This is the object that we got out from the internet. Isn't that cool? Beforehand, I didn't have this object. I didn't know what the ID of this thing is. I didn't know if it's completed or not. I didn't know what its title is or what its user ID is. But thanks to the fact that behind the scenes with JavaScript, I made a request onto the internet, which went out there to a server and got this response, the server out there on the internet could give me some information that I didn't have. For example, imagine if I asked the server, please send me the latest number tick that came out of the market. And the server gives me the most up-to-date, for the past millisecond, whatever it is, gives me the last number of whatever ticked in the market. Now I have that piece of information, which I didn't have before. And I could put it into the page. I could show it to people so that they can make decisions about whether they want to buy or sell. It's going up, it's going down, etc., etc. This is stuff that you can do while you're on the page, getting more pieces of information and doing actions and doing different things while you're still on a page, not browsing away. Let's, just for fun, try out what happens if I do get a page. Let's say, what if I go fetch google.com? Google.com, okay? Just for fun. And I'm not going to get it as JSON. I'm going to get it as, how do we do that? Let me see. MDN fetch response. Okay, here we have the response. I can get it as JSON text. I can get it as text. Let's get it as text. Okay, let's get it as text. And then let's, instead of logging it to the console, I'm going to open up a function over here. And I'm going to say debugger, just because I want to step through it and watch it as we go. And then I'll log it out to the console to have this text. Okay. Here we go. So I'm asking now to the page to do as follows. JavaScript. While we're still browsing on this page and not losing our place and still continuing to enjoy whatever it is we're clicking or watching or whatever we're doing on this page, meanwhile, go behind the scenes and get me google.com. So this is doing a little bit the opposite. Right now, we're going to fetch a web page, an actual HTML page, using this thing, which is supposed to get you pieces of information. But whatever is out there on the internet, you can request it. Anything is fair game, right? If it's a URL that you can browse to, you can request it in your address bar, and you can request it in the fetch. So I'm going to press enter over here. Let's see what happens. Oh, we actually got an error. Oh, here's the error. The error is that we exist on typico.com, but we requested something that belongs in a different domain. It belongs to google.com. Because of security reasons and limitations, they don't allow us to go what's called cross-domain. If I'm in one website belonging to one domain, typico.com, I can make requests for everything coming from those servers only, from those computers out there, from this website only. I can't start bringing in other stuff from other third-party websites, from websites that have nothing to do with these servers. Maybe I can pull in something from a malicious server, from a malicious website, or from something completely unrelated. There are rules that you're supposed to follow about if you're able to request something outside of your website or not outside of your website. So instead of going to google.com, I'm just going to request this page itself that we're browsing. Let's request it itself and see what we get back. Okay, I'm going to press enter. And everything happened pretty fast again, but it worked. Let's see the network tab. Here's our request. We sent a request out there, which is very similar to our initial request when we first browsed to this page. It is a GET request to get this page, just like when we requested to go get this page when we want to browse to this link. Except this time, we didn't do it from the browser address bar. This time we did it inside of JavaScript as a piece of programming that happens in your page while the person is using the page. You can meanwhile go behind the scenes and get this and get that and get the other. So we got a copy of the front page, the page of this website itself, and let's see what the response was. And as expected, it's an HTML page. In fact, we can probably even see over here in the request headers, and the response headers. Here we go. Content type text/HTML, which basically means the server is saying, I hear your request and I respond to you with a bunch of HTML. It could have maybe been an image or a CSS file or a JavaScript file, but in this case, the server says, if you're asking me for this URL, I respond to you with a bunch of text HTML, a bunch of HTML inside of this file, which is exactly what we got. So you could also do that. You could also go and fetch an entire HTML page as part of your JavaScript coding, although you wouldn't usually do that. Usually, this is useful for like getting pieces of information, getting chunks of data, and doing something cool with it in the page while you're still on the page and doing things on the page. So after exploring this concept just a little bit, let me open it up to you guys a little bit to ask some questions. Let me scroll up a bit here and see some Q&A real quick before continuing on. Someone was suggesting to click on futures. Oh, I'm sorry about that. What was it again? Market. What was it again? Marketwatch.com, and then click on futures. Marketwatch.com, and then futures. Where is futures? Latest finance, personal finance, economy. Might be missed. Is it in the more list? Is it on latest? I must be missing something. Below the black bar. Below the black bar. Futures, there we go. Okay, so this is updating live. Yeah, I see some numbers changed. Very cool. And this arrow keeps filling in, right? The arrow keeps stretching out. I see this number changed over here. Oh, and the arrow changed as well. So you see, how do they do this? You can zoom in a little bit over here just so we can focus on this. None of the other shtusim as was requested. So isn't this cool? There is a graphic arrow over here that keeps changing shape and extending further. And how do they do that? Is it, or maybe because I was mousing over different things, that's what was changing the shape? Something like that. But how do they get this new -65, -25%? That's because in the JavaScript code of this web page itself, someone right now is sending a request and getting a response and filling it into the HTML. Let's watch it as it happens. Let's see if we see any responses and requests happening here. If not, then that might be a WebSocket thing again. I forgot where. Oh, there we go. We see some requests happening. Oh, but this is just for a GIF. Someone just requested an image for some reason. But that's not the data. Let me refresh the page to see if we have any WebSockets, which is often used for. Yeah, this is a website. Oh, there we go. Now it's showing me. Now we could look at messages. And here we go. It keeps coming in. Another message just came in. Another message just came in. These are new pieces of information that's coming back from the server. We keep on asking the server for stuff, and the server keeps on sending us stuff. In WebSockets, it's slightly different, actually. It's you ask the server, give me whenever you got something, keep giving it to me, and the server keeps responding to us with here's more, here's more, here's more. That's a relatively new technology called WebSockets, where you don't have to keep asking the server to give you something, but the server just keeps giving it to you. But you have to keep a connection open the whole time with something called a socket, WebSocket. But you could see the web page remains, didn't have to reload the page to get the latest numbers, and still we're getting more stuff from the server. We are in the front end here, we're on the client side, and we keep getting stuff from the back end. And in the back end, they're very busy over there. The server is churning around every time it's finding, oh, 2 seconds went by or 10 seconds went by. There's a new number that just came into the database. The market's shifted a little bit more this way, a little bit more that way. So the server is doing a lot of computations and processing, and it's determining, okay, we have a new number now. It went down from 65% to 64% or whatever. So I got to send that back to whoever asked me for it. So it sends out to the internet. Here's a response for you. Here's a response for you. Here's a response for you. 500 different people that might be watching that website at that moment. They're all getting back their little bits and pieces of information. And each one of their browsers, the JavaScript is like, oh, thank you. I got some information from the server here. And it's putting it into here. Let me put it into this li and this div and this p tag over there to fill in the blanks of what we didn't know about for the last few seconds. Now we have a new piece of information, filling it in here, filling it in there. And that doesn't last long before the next piece of information comes in from the server, and you got to do it all over again. Who knows, maybe it's in a loop, maybe it's in a for loop that like keeps checking from the server every few seconds. Do you have anything new for me? And putting it into the web page. All of this information coming from out there on the internet, from the backend, from the server out there. So let me just go through one or two more little questions here about that, as we're watching this cool information coming in from the server. Keeping scrolling in over here. Next question. As to how do you insert that stuff into the web page. So that we covered with jQuery in the past, like 2-3 classes-ish, or maybe it was 1 or 2 classes before that. The idea is with jQuery, we figured out a way how to take this part of the page and change what's in there. Add some more HTML in there, put some text in there, remove some text from there. Like I'll bet you right here on this page over here, Market Watch, I'll bet you there's a piece of code that is right now asking every few seconds, please give me this TD from this TR from this element over here. Yeah, I knew it was a table. It looked like a table. It's TD and a table and TR. Give me that one over there and fill it up with this new number. Right now we see it has 21708 in it. If we wait long enough, oh, we actually went back to the first page. Let me put my mouse on this over here. Right now, this TD contains the value of -62 over here, as you can see. If we wait long enough, oh, now it changed into -61. This just happened as we were watching it, that someone went into this element, which we demonstrated by using jQuery. They might be using some other technologies. Maybe they're using straight up JavaScript, or maybe they're using a different library like AngularJS or React.js. We were exploring this concept using jQuery, and we figured out how with jQuery you can find this thing in the page, get me this TD from this particular TR, from this particular table, which is at this particular ID or CSS class or whatever it is that's in the page, and in that element, append or text or HTML or prepend or whatever different functions you can use from jQuery, put that in there, that new number that we just got, or this new updated information that we have, put that into this element here, change that other element over there. We did that using JavaScript and jQuery. It's a very rough overview. Hopefully you guys remember a little bit more about that when we learned more hands-on on that with jQuery. But hopefully you guys can figure out how to Google up on that, and probably FreeCodeCamp has a section on this about fetching stuff from the internet, and then just how do you manipulate that into the page and put that in the spot where you want it to be. Can you show us how to do it like in the deals site? Looks like it's doing straight out HTML. Yeah, in this case, it's probably just getting the element and putting in there the different number. Sometimes they do different than that. Sometimes they replace the entire tag, or they replace the entire table, or the entire TR with a whole new set of stuff. And that could be, each one depends on your particular use case. You might change the entire page, or you might just change a section of it, or you might just put a different piece of text inside of it. and leave everything the way it is. I'm not sure what you meant by, can you show us how to do it like in a deal site? The deal site, the idea was topbabydeal.com, and Levi will probably be able to tell you guys more specifics about
So
that.
actually, I'm just going to
Yeah.
jump in here a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the deal site, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 classes ago, I can find it. I did some live debugging of making a request on the deal site to do things like upvote or downvote. And there you can also see the request and the response, and then it changes when you get the response that now you upvoted or downvoted. You can see the same concept that you're actually getting new data and then manipulating the page. In other words, making the downvote thing red or the upvote thing blue, etc.
Very cool. Very cool. So I'll tell you what, I actually got to step out right now. So why don't you take over just a little bit more on that? Maybe you actually want to show guys about that again, or you had something else you wanted to live debug with them, and I'll be back shortly.
Okay, so I'm not at my computer right now, so I can't do that debugging. I can do it in the next class, or I can find the video where we did it. I think I'm going to go over now just what we started at the beginning of the class. And first of all, feel free to ask in the chat any questions you have about this concept, about making a request, response, changing things on the page based on the response. And I'll do my best to respond to that. No pun intended again. But in the meantime, let's finish the last few career paths we were talking about and what the options are. So first of all, excuse me if it's a little bit loud. This is the only option I have right now outside. So we talked about being a programmer, a developer, a back-end engineer, a front-end engineer, a back-end developer, a front-end developer, etc. We talked a little bit about the operation side, DevOps. First of all, can you hear me? If somebody can just mention if you can hear me, please. Thank you. So we mentioned the DevOps side, where the people basically take care of like the infrastructure, the servers, the image hosting, the CDN, the databases, etc. We talked about the design element and UX, to be a UX designer, or even just making mock-ups for the site. We talked about that a little bit. And then we talked about QA, quality assurance, testing. And we talked about the 2 aspects there that you can either be someone, or at least to start, you can start by doing manual testing, actually testing every part of the site. And you can learn various technical skills like that. And it also helps to start to learn a little bit about databases, because then you can actually check that the right data is in the database after you change something. And then we talked about the automation testing, where you can actually write some code that will do the testing for you. That's like a next level of testing. So if you know some programming, but maybe you're having a hard time getting a developer job, you can look into maybe getting a development automation job, something like that, a test automation. So those are those. Now we're up to the next few from that slide that I had up. One of them is product manager. So what does it mean to be a product manager at a technical company? So let's say you're working at a company that deals with, let's say it's building software for like property managers. Excuse me one second. Let's say you're building software for like property managers. So then, okay, the product manager will be the one to think, okay, we need to build this new feature that will allow us to track and will allow the tenant to track every part of a maintenance request. So the product manager will be the one to think through every step and exactly what the product should do. So I'll say, okay, we'll have a form on the site, on the portal. And then the user will put in their information, what their problem is, and then we'll respond with an email. Then maybe the user will have to respond with the email with some details. And then the building manager will get a notification. And then maybe as the plumber gets close to the house, the tenant will get a notification, are you home, etc. Right? The product manager has to think through every element of the product, exactly what it should do, how it should do it. And then he
let's just say bigger companies, at some of the smaller companies, you know, the developer, the designer is all one person. You know, you kind of just all figure it out. But at some of the bigger companies, the product manager will then give these specifications, the features to the designer or the UX person, and then they'll create a mock-up and a design, and then they will send it over to the developer to build it. So it helps a lot to have technical understanding of code and programming and SQL or whatever, just basic technical skills to be a good product manager. From what I've heard and seen, many of the good product managers at big companies like Google and Facebook and whatever actually started off as developers, and then maybe they got a little bored of development or whatever, and then they moved more into the product side of things. So a mock-up means like a design of the page. Today there's some more sophisticated tools that actually will allow you to make like a page design, almost like a Photoshop file, interactive, where you can actually click on buttons. It's a way to, so a mock-up is basically just like a fake version of a website or an app where it looks like the website or the app, but there isn't actually any code there. It's just like a design of it, but it looks like you're mocking up what the app should be, something like that. At any rate, so that's about a product manager. So a product manager, you know, deals a little bit more with the people side, getting things done, but also thinking about the feature and how the feature works, etc. So that's another element, another career path that involves technical work, and especially if you're going to do that at a strictly tech company, it definitely helps to have the basic technical knowledge. Which, by the way, all this is one of the reasons I was saying in my webinar that it's valuable to learn these skills and to learn how the web works, to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, even if you don't think you're going to be a developer, or maybe you think you'll try out development and you don't know if you want to do it forever. It doesn't matter. These skills can be applied to so many different areas. Every single person in the world today, maybe not every single, 90% of people have a smartphone in their pocket, all right? That smartphone runs code. Computers run code. Your microwave runs code. The whole world today is built on top of code. If code ceases to exist, you're not going to get water from, you know, you're not going to get electricity, you're not going to get water. You know, it's all running based on these automated systems. So it's very important to know these skills regardless of which exact field you end up going into. All right, so that's product. Next, let me just look at this. Let's see this website, my Zmanim add alert. If I check the box and enter my phone number, I get a confirmation and a text back. I understand we'll not be talking about text back, but how does the system know what time the Zman is as it sends the text? Then where does it pull the info from? Okay, so Avremel mentioned they have a database with the Zmanim, and basically the way they build that is there's an algorithm that will tell you, you know, based on sunrise and sunset, you know, you can learn this. There's some halacha books that will tell you the exact calculations. And what they're able to do is basically just do the calculations, put it in the database, write the code that will make the calculation. So they may not be calculating the Zman on the spot when they text you. Okay, I'm sorry, Manny. Right when they text you, but they're just pulling it from the database like Avremel said. That is a baby. I have 2 babies in the stroller right now. All right, what else? Next. The next career path is IT/security. This is something I don't necessarily know enough about to really give you a very informed decision. Okay, but Manny, I'm on the phone right now, okay? But I'll just give you a quick overview, and that quick overview is that the IT people are the ones that set up, there's different levels of IT. We happen to be moving houses today, so things are a little bit crazy between today and tomorrow. Anyway, I hope you'll bear with me. So there's different levels in the IT space. Thank you. One part of IT is like the people that will come set up your internet, or if you're at a big company, they'll set up all the wires and everything. That's one part of IT. Then there's like deeper levels of IT. They deal with the networking, setting up the IP addresses for your website, setting up the internal networks for, all of the applications that happen at your company, etc. And then there's like a deeper level, which is the people that deal with the security of the network. So at a big company, think of, let's say B&H, which is a pretty big company, right? They have internal IT people and security people who are dealing with, making sure there's no malicious actors coming to the site. They're monitoring network traffic. They're, checking the IP addresses of everybody that's coming to visit the site, making sure they're all good. They're checking the user agent strings, whatever, or they're writing tools that will do this. So the IT people really deal at the network level, not on the program level, meaning not on the actual what does the website do, but the network that's relaying the information, relaying the data back and forth. Is that safe, and how to set that up, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's the IT/security aspect. There's other people that know a lot more about the IT field than me, but it's also related and also a technical field. Part of that, in some IT manager roles, it's, setting up the computers for new employees, making sure they have all the correct programs, making sure they're using it in a secure way, managing all the software that's on each of the company computers, et cetera, stuff like that. I believe honeypot form. What do you mean? So let me look. I think I had one more thing on that slide. We could talk about SEO a little bit. That's the last thing I have on that slide. So there's a few parts of SEO and marketing. Part of it is just like, being good at writing copy, having good messages. That's one part of marketing. But then there's also the technical side of marketing that's related to SEO, search engine optimization. And that is basically understanding, how does Google view my site? How does a search engine view my site, right? Actually, CHYE, one of the courses they did for this program over the last couple months was an SEO course. And part of it is understanding, if Google's going to come to my site, they need to be able to see the right elements. They need to be able to see the right data about the page. There's a concept of like structured data, Json-Ld. It's basically a way of, if you look at any like WordPress page and you do a view page source on it, you'll see that they have towards the top of the page, if you look for the words JSON, I think -LD, you'll see they have this JSON. We already know about JSON. They have this JSON blob that basically gives a structured layout of what the data is on the page. So if it's an article, it'll say like article, and then the author, and then the image, and then the date it was published, all in a very structured way. So an SEO person might say, okay, I'm not actually the one that's going to go ahead and build the site and, write all the code to decide how the site should work and all the features and whatever. But I may have to be the one that's going to go analyze the HTML on the site and see what's wrong with it from an SEO perspective. Which tags are missing? Which HTML heading is the wrong type of heading and Google's not going to like it? Maybe the structured data is not there, the structured content. So SEO and the marketing side also can benefit a lot from understanding the basic technical parts of HTML, CSS, JavaScript in general, how the web works, programming, etc. All right, if anyone has, so those are more or less what I can think of in terms of what the various roles are. Again, if you have specific questions or you're looking for specific advice on which direction you should go in, I'm happy to try and help. I do want to remind you the first job is going to be the hardest, but it gets much easier from there. So in my opinion, I would say just take any job that will pay you or that will allow you to work in a production environment. When I say production environment, I mean a real world environment where there's actually stuff happening on the page, there's customers paying for things, real world high stakes environment. That's how you learn. So if there's any if you have any way to get into that world, if you have a friend or something, QA, you know, however you can get your foot in the door, it's probably best to try and do your best to get your foot in the door. Don't think, oh, I'm going to wait to start applying for jobs or to try and get into the industry until I'm the best programmer, the best developer, the best IT guy, whatever. You want to just try and get your foot in the door. That's what's really, really important. So that's on the career end of things. Let me see if there's any questions here that I did not yet address. Honeypot, Google Honeypot. All right, I'll take a look. I assume it has something to do with either the Zmanim thing or, oh, it's a form that only computers can fill, so you can tell. Got it. Yeah, there's other things like Captcha, Recaptcha. You'll see a lot of times you have to fill out the different pictures. They'll say like, hey, tap all the images of a sign, of a street sign. And that's also to detect bots. So yeah, developers do actually have to think about a lot of that stuff, but that's kind of stuff that's already, once it hit the application. When I was talking about the IT people and dealing with malicious actors and security, a lot of what they do is on the network level in terms of, you know, where is this traffic coming from? Which country? What's the IP? Are there any patterns we can detect? Are there any holes in our network that they can get past that will make it dangerous? Things like that. What's the difference between Captcha and Recaptcha? I think Captcha is just a concept. A Captcha is like a little quiz that you have to do. And Recaptcha is the specific product that Google made, which is basically a type of Captcha. As far as I understand it, I think that's what it is. Yeah, they do also have hidden Captcha these days, hidden Recaptcha. I think Recaptcha 3.0 will basically try to make a best guess about whether the traffic is healthy or not. It will try to use the hidden Captcha, but once in a while it will pop up a real Captcha if it's not really sure. So these tools have gotten very smart. And by the way, sites like, so Google is always doing things like, you know, hey, let's do Recaptcha. Now you think they're just really nice and they want to give a free tool to developers. But actually, part of what they're doing is they're training their AI models what an image of a street sign is by having everyone actually go on images of street signs. And they do very similar things with like the free photos by Google, right? Google has a phenomenal free photos app, high quality free photos app, right? So you'll think, oh wow, they're tzaddikim, they're incredibly righteous and kind. They're giving us this amazing free product. There isn't even any advertising on it. But actually what they're doing, at least a lot of it, is they're using these billions and billions of images to train their machine learning models about, you know, what's a tree, what's a dog, what's a human, what does a human face look like, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's just a slight little tangent about Google Recaptcha and videos. All right, you are there, Yisrael. All right.
Yeah, excellent.
So yeah, we got through most of the various career paths. I think in the next one, I'll try and do some live debugging somebody asked for, and I'll try and find the video where I did the debugging of Top Baby Deal. All right, we'll see you.
Yes,
Thanks
sir.
for bearing
Excellent.
with the noise.
Thank you, Label. Appreciate it as always. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to make sure we saw what code does it entail here to do this kind of thing so that you guys know what to look up, where to go to from here, what documentation to read so you guys know how to do this cool thing yourself. So
Sorry, I just want to a quick
Yeah.
thing. Looks like I missed a few questions in the Q&A.
Go ahead.
If you're posting it on Slack, and I'll try to answer it there if it's still relevant.
Okay, great. So here we started using the fetch function. The fetch is actually a relatively recent feature in JavaScript that you could use. Before that, you basically were using most of the time jQuery. jQuery has some nice functions that you could use to put requests out there on the internet, but soon enough, everyone realized that, hey, jQuery is so cool. We like what they did with making these kinds of requests out there. that they actually built it into the browser itself, and they made this thing called fetch, which is how you can make requests to the internet inside the browser itself, even without jQuery, without even including, the jQuery file, so you could use it in your web page and then using jQuery functions, even without any jQuery at all, just straight up plain JavaScript, similar to how you make like a variable var x equals 10. You could also right away use alert without needing anything additional or anything. So you could also use fetch already built into the browser. That's one way how you could get stuff from the internet. You could Google it, MDN fetch. It's called the Fetch API. Fetch API provides an interface for fetching resources, including across the network. It will seem familiar to anyone who has used XML HTTP requests, which is the old-fashioned way how everyone used to do it. But the new API provides a more powerful and flexible feature set. So it explains all about it, how it works, probably shows also some examples about how to use it, or it basically just gives the details. And then it probably links you to more. Oh, this is just these things over here. All the different things that you can pass into it. Here's an example of how to actually use it, etc., etc. So you can think of it a little bit as this way. What's actually going on out there on the internet is a lot of machines are exchanging between each other HTTP requests and HTTP responses. That's what's actually going on behind the scenes. This is, you guys are now being taken into the ones and zeros of the computer now, and you're seeing that it's not pretty buttons and shiny graphics and pages and like scrollings and effects and animations. That's not actually what the internet is made out of. It's just a bunch of computers sending and receiving from each other HTTP requests, HTTP response, HTTP request, HTTP response. And it happens to be that the browser makes that easy for you because someone decided, look, it's difficult for a human person if you want to get the useful page of, let's say, Facebook.com. Let's not call that useful. Let's just call it entertaining or time wasting. If you want to get a page such as Google.com or Facebook.com, instead of you having to type out yourself to the internet, hey, internet, I am 129.234.55.100. I want to place a HTTP/2.0 request. I want to place a GET request to /, which is the root, the beginning of the website. The host that I'm trying to go to is Facebook.com. And the date that this request is, by the time you finish typing it out, the date may have actually changed from when you started typing out this request, right? So what is the browser? The browser, if you want to think about it, is a useful tool to make these requests for you. It tells you here, just tell me the URL that you want to go to, just tell me the link you want to go to, and I'll type out this whole entire technicality for you. And I'll send it out to the internet for you, and I will get the response from the internet for you, and I'll present the whole response that I got from the internet for you into the page. That's what a browser is. A browser is really hiding from you to protect you from the technicalities of the HTTP request and the HTTP response. But at the end of the day, that's all that's happening on the internet. Clients, devices, computers, mobile phones are making a lot of requests to other computers on the internet called servers. And servers, these machines out there, these big data centers, are receiving a lot of these requests, and they're responding with responses. That's all that's going on. Request, response, request, response. And the browser is trying to save you the hassle of all those technicalities, so it helps you by making the request for you and using the response for you. But really, everything that's happening out there is requests and responses. HTTP, please give me this. HTTP, here is your response of that. And what we're learning now is that it isn't only by typing that into the URL that you can request something from out there and get it back from the internet. Once you do get a little bit technically savvy, then you can do this kind of magic yourself by performing these kinds of requests to the internet and getting their responses. it still could seem a little daunting. Like I don't entirely understand every little bit about what this HTTP thing was, and what's the GET, and what's the 101, or what's this thing, or what's that thing. Fine. So you don't have to deal with all the technicalities about it. But one little thing that you do have to do is just at least put together the URL where you want to go, and then write up some code for how to process the response from when it comes back. Because we're going to give you some raw data that you're going to want to know what to do with it and how to do with it. Maybe it's going to be some HTML. Maybe it's going to be some JavaScript data. Maybe it's going to be just a number or a word or something like that. So you are getting a little bit more on the technical side here by saying, hey, give me the driver's seat over here a little bit. I'm not going to just use the browser to make all the HTTP requests for me to browse from page to page to page. I want to do this a little bit myself by asking for something cool, something different, something specific, a little piece of information that I want to have live right now during while the page is still here. And I'll place the request. I'll put in the right URL of where this request needs to go, which server it needs to go to, who is expecting, waiting for me to ask for them for something, and they're gonna know what to respond to me. And actually, this is where I wanted to follow up on one of these questions I read here. What was that question? So using the functions Israel showed before, we can pull data from a database. Very good question. Where does the database come into all this? Where does that belong? And how do we get this information from a database? Let's say there's a database somewhere with a bunch of names and addresses and phone numbers, and I'm on my mobile device, or I'm on my laptop or desktop computer, and I want to get those names and those addresses. Now, I don't have them yet because I'm here in my room with my computer, with my phone, with whatever it is. But the information is out there somewhere. It's on yellowpages.com or something. It's wherever it is that it might be. And I want to get that information from there. I want to place a request out there and get that information from wherever it is that information exists right now. So let's go a little bit further into the other side of the internet, into the server side of the internet, and see what life is like over there and what happens over there. For the meanwhile, we did a whole lot of stuff from the client side, from inside the browser. First, we dealt a lot with the front end of things, completely how everything works for normal users that want to see pretty pages with links, with words, with stuff that appears nicely, that makes sense, that you can click. And then going a little bit further behind the scenes, programming that, building the HTML, the CSS, programming the JavaScript that can mess things around. And now we're even going even deeper than that. Where does all of this come from? Where does the whole entire page come from? And when I place little requests for a little piece of information, how does that come from the server? What happens out there in that server when I ask it for a little piece of information, or for a big piece of information, for an entire page? What happens over there on that server? How does that work? So I'm trying to think of what's the best way to show you guys how that works. And I'm wondering if there's something online, maybe that I should have maybe researched this before the class, but it's basically, let's say there's something like Node.js Express test demo. I wonder if we could find something online that will show us what happens on the server side. Oh, this is a test. Let's take out the word test. That might be a better search. I'm not sure it's going to give me what I'm hoping to find. You have to actually have a look at how it works. Okay, you know what? Let's just have a deep dive into it ourselves. What I'm going to do is I'm going to log into one of my own websites that I'm hosting. Hopefully I won't regret this somehow. Okay. Here is a company that sells you server space on the internet. Maybe you've heard of them, maybe you haven't. Let me log in. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to skip this part out of view. And this. Okay. So here I am, this company that I'm renting some space on a server out there on the internet. Shows me, here's your little server over here. And I can click on it. And I can see some details about it. There's my server information. There's its IP address, where it's located in the internet maze of wires. There's probably some details here that I should not be putting out on the screen, but whatever. It's just my little testing and development environment. So worst case. And what else do we have here? Let's look at the. All right, this is something with which basically you go to web hosting, for example, right? Google web hosting. You'll find something like GoDaddy. And here we're going to go to something like servers, VPS hosting. And you're going to choose a plan over here. You're going to sign up. You're going to pay for it. And you're going to end up with an account that looks something like this, where like, okay, here's your server out there on the internet. It's sitting out there in the public. You can configure it. You can set it up and prepare it so that it has the stuff that people want to go to get things off the internet. So I'm going to go into this. Oh, here's a few other interesting things. Here's where you set up some domain names. You also go to websites like Namecheap or whatever, and you look for. We went through this once, I think, once before. My awesome website one. And you try to find a good website name. You buy it for however much it costs per year, and you configure it to set it up so that it connects to your server. You go into this page and you hook it up, and then it connects up to it. So for example, one web page that I have out there, which I really should be doing something with because it's a cool idea, but I have to finish it, is let's bring Mashiach.com. And yeah, as you guys can see, trying to do something with it, but time constraints keeps pushing me off. News section, the chat section, the scheduling learning section, the documentary section, the join the force section where you can sign up and join with the effort, etc., etc. So this is one of the websites that I have hosted on this server over here. So let's look into a little bit how that worked and what happens. I'm going to go into, why not? Let's have some fun and go into the console. I have to remember what was the login for this. I think it should be something like this. This. If not, it's the other one. Okay, so this looks mighty technical over here. It looks rather scary in a way, understandably. Chances are this is not part of what you guys will be dealing with most of the time. Most of the time, you guys are just going to be HTML developers, CSS developers, JavaScript developers, and a little bit also of backend development. Somewhere along the way, when a client asks you to set up their website, you might have to figure out a few of these things. It depends. If you work in a big company where there is someone designated to do that, you're not going to have to look at that. He's going to be the geek, or as it's called, the sysadmin, or as the label was calling it, the DevOps people. They set up the whole server and they do all the commands and the configurations and like all these you know, the white on black scary console screens, and you're typing in commands and like you're monitoring the status and like managing the computer and all that. This is basically just managing a server out there on the internet. You know, you're seeing if everything's working well, you're setting it up so that it should work well, you're checking to see if there's any problems, etc., etc. So, yeah, whatever, just to show you guys around a little bit what life is like on a server. You have that kind of command line place where you can type in commands and configure things to make them work. And one of the things that we have inside of a server as well is, let's see if you can see that from the console, from the shell terminal, that is show me something about here. Show me system control status of MySQL. Let's put in the password. Okay, and it's telling me it's active and running. This is basically telling me that on the server, here in this server, there is a MySQL server. What does that mean, that in the server there's a MySQL server? MySQL is a database system. It's a program that exists on a computer, which, as I showed you guys once, it has basically a bunch of Excel sheets sort of thing. That's kind of a very amateur way of describing it. But, you know, let's just have a look at some Excel sheets just to refresh our memory. A database is basically just a bunch of information lined up in a chart. And the idea is to get this piece of information, get that piece of information, get me these numbers, those numbers, get me this first name, this last name, this phone number. All of that stuff exists in a database that is on the server, on the machine that is out there on the internet. Sometimes it's slightly more complicated. One server takes care of all the web page stuff, and another separate machine, a separate server, has all the database stuff. But usually in your smaller websites or medium projects, everything is all in one in the same server. On the server, you have a few interesting different programs that need to take care of a few different things. You have one program that is there the whole time, just listening. Is anyone asking me something? And it's just waiting to hear, oh, a request came in, and now you have to do something about this request. There's a program on that computer dedicated to do just that. Let's just open up a thing over here. And let's just take this little piece out of here, just for a little bit of fun illustrations. Why not? And it got a little bit of my face in there as well. Wonderful. Okay, so this server over here. Why did I have to do that? Just give me this, please. Thank you. What is scarier than the letter U? The letter W. Okay. So in this server that's out there on the internet that we saw in this graphic is a few important programs. One of them is the listening ear that's constantly like, is someone asking me for something? Is someone asking me for something? That is called a web server. Okay, so it's a little bit confusing because there's a bunch of different things called server here. The whole idea of something called a server is just that it's there sitting and waiting to help people, to serve people. That's what it's about. So this entire computer is called a server because its whole purpose is to wait around and help people. But that's just on a general basis. Then inside of it, it has specific programs that help people with different specific things. So let's give everyone their specific names over here. This guy is called a server, just generally. That's what he is. Then inside of here, he has a program or two. I don't know how we want to represent a program. Maybe we'll just make it like a gray box like this that has, you know, some sort of, yeah, he does different actions. So it has the lightning bolt shape on it. Why not? Okay, one program that's running on the computer, kind of like on your computer right now, you have a program called Zoom that's running, and Zoom is currently taking care of transmitting bits and pieces of information of this class, of what you're seeing, the visuals, the video, from my computer all the way over the internet to your computer. and presenting those images to you in the proper way. So on this server, we have something called a web server. And web server. You might hear of some, oops, sorry about that. Web server. You might hear of a few different ones. There is one called, just like you could have Google Hangouts to make meetings between people, or you can have Zoom to make meetings between people, or you can have TeamViewer to connect from one computer to another. So also making this web server program, you can either be using Apache HTTPD web server, or you could have Nginx web server, and there's a few others. I'm not going to bother. These are basically the two main ones you might be hearing about, generally speaking. What is his job? His job is to just listen out when something actually comes in over the wire, right? With this server is connected to the internet. It's like, oh, here's my wire connected from my internet port, going out to the whole connection inside of the data center. When something actually comes in over this wire and comes into this computer, hey, I have a request for you. It goes to the web server, and the web server is like, yeah, tell me all the HTML, tell me all the HTTP stuff, tell me the IP address where it came from, tell me the host and the date and the get and all that. Tell me all that stuff because I'm gonna know what to do with it. And it's the web server's responsibility to take the requests that are coming in and to know what to do and what to send back out on the wire for the people to receive on the other end. And we're going to focus on this a little bit more, some more tonight and a little bit more in next class, because this is the important one that you're mostly going to be dealing with, which is the web server is going to say, someone is asking for facebook.com. We have to give them back an HTML page for their browser. But what date should it say on that page? What name? What password is supposed to be valid? What picture is their profile picture? What was the most recent photos that they should be seeing? All of these are questions that you, the programmer, are going to be answering, because you're going to be writing functions and variables and loops and all sorts of things to process all this information and to say, oh, I see, it's this guy, Reuven Shimon Shmerel, logged in. This is his profile picture. What is his age? We're going to have to go look that up in the database, which I'm getting to in a minute. Which date is today? Let's compute that out of the function that gets today's date, etc., and put that all together into a nice HTML page. Now, web server, here you go. Go send that back over the internet to whoever asked for this. This is where you, the developer, come in, because in order to answer some of these requests, you have to do some programming, some computation, some loops, some functions, variables, all of that stuff that we learned about in order to compute what to answer with to people that are asking for a page. This all happens in the web server. And the other thing I wanted to answer from the question in the chat was that there's another program that's running on the server. And that one is called a database server. Let's make this one back big. Again, I'm not sure which size it was before. I'm going to guess something like this or something, maybe a little bit larger. Not sure. Database server. And all these things are called a server because they're all here to respond to requests of clients that are asking for things. Each one is kind of a server to someone else and a client to someone else. In a way, the server is a client asking the web server, hey, web server, please take care of this. And the web server is the server that's answering and saying, yeah, here, I'm giving you the answer. Then the web server itself is a client because it's like, I don't have the data. I don't have the information. What is the guy's age? What is the guy's location or phone number or name? I don't know. Hey, database, can you be my server, please? I need to ask from you for some pieces of information. Please give it to me so that I can put it into an HTML page and give it back to the guy that's asking for it. And that's where the database server comes in. You might hear of a few different ones out there. Some of the prominent ones nowadays. This is a few more options than we had before. Nowadays, you're going to be working with stuff like MySQL. You're going to be working with Microsoft SQL Server. You might have something like PostgreSQL. Maybe you'll even have one of the newer kinds of what's called NoSQL databases, such as MongoDB. Maybe you'll have a much more fancier enterprise-grade kind of database, such as Oracle. I forgot what it's called. Oracle Database Server. I'm not sure exactly. Okay, all of these are possible options that you're going to be installing one basically on your particular website. Actually, the truth is you're not going to be installing it. That's for the geeks that do all these command line stuff and set up the whole server for you. Chances are you're going to buy a simple, cheap hosting account which already has all of this stuff set up for you. It already has the web server installed. It already has the database installed. Everything is ready for you to just set up shop, start coding, start programming, and making your website. But chances are you're not going to have all of these. You're going to have one of these. Maybe by default, it'll come with MySQL installed. That's a very common one that you hear about nowadays. If you went with some of Microsoft's technologies like .NET and Windows Server and that sort of thing, then you might have Microsoft SQL Server. Or if you're using one of their new kind of things, what's it called? Azure or something like that, then you might have Microsoft SQL Server. If you're more daring and you want to use the open source community version of a good SQL database, you might use the PostgreSQL. If you want to try MongoDB, or if you're in a big company, you might find you have basically one of these, not all of them, but one of these is going to be the database system that you're going to use. And yeah, basically, like we described, that's how it works. A request comes into the server hands it off to the web server. That's just a program running inside of this computer. And this program is supposed to do something with this request. Like try to find a page, try to find an HTML file, try to find an image or a CSS file or a JavaScript file. Whatever it is, come up with the right response and give it back to me to go back on the internet to whoever asked for this. And the web server itself is going to do some calculations, some computations, which you're going to be programming him to do. And some of the time, the web server might be like, okay, I need some information here. I need the last 10 deals that came up to this website, or I need the next entry in what is the weather going to be like, what's the forecast supposed to be. And that might be a way in the database server. So the web server is going to say, hey, database server, go to all of your sheets that you have over there, right? All of these, right? All the data that you have inside of your sheets. The database has like multiples of these sheets, one after another after another. They're most commonly called tables, because it's like a table that has like rows and columns. And you're basically sending the database what's called a query. Hey, database, can you please find all of the deals from the most recent month ordered by price, and then you order them by rank, and check if they weren't already sold, or they were not placed on hold, or they weren't voted less than 20% by everyone who's voted them. And you can create these kinds of very, very complex queries to ask the database for very specific information, and the database is going to come back to you with like, here are 10 rows, each one that has 30 different columns of pieces of information each one. Here you go, web server. Now it's up to you. You have this in a variable, and you can do all the programming that you need with this to go give it back to the people that asked for it. And the web server is going to do some loops, is going to do some variables and some processing and going through some arrays and some objects and putting together an HTML page that is supposed to go back to the user. So this is a general overview of what happens on the server out there on the internet and how you, so I wanted to show, let's see what I can show you guys a little bit about what's going on with my server over there. What happens is, I wonder if there is any, I guess it might only be visible from this side of things. If I show you guys, this is going to look a little technical, but if you can bear with me, here is the folder of all the files. Let's see if we can make it slightly cleaner. Whatever, it is what it is. Basically, these are folders over here. There's a folder called HTML. I don't know if you guys can see, it's pretty small over here, and I can't seem to zoom in over here. Oh, there we go. There's a folder called HTML, another one called IEPNETWS, another one called Mashiach, another one called Stam, another one called Woe, apparently. Whatever those projects may have been back then. So I have these folders, and let's go see what's inside, let's say, of the Mashiach folder. That was the website we had examined. So show me what's inside of the Mashiach folder. And we find over here a whole bunch of files. And you could see over here, a lot of these files end in PHP. I'll get to that in a second, but other than that, you could see actually there is also an HTML file here. A plain old file in the folder called .html. Kind of like the ones that we created ourselves. We created HTML files, and they, you know, they have tags in there, and it's kind of like you're asking the server, hey, please send me this HTML file. Let's see if that could actually work. I'm going to go to the browser. I'm going to go to letsbringmashiach.com / what was the file's name? readme.html. readme.html. I'm not sure this is going to work, but let's try. Yes, it worked. Very good. So here is the HTML file that's inside of there. Let's see if we can read it for a second. That is done by readme.html. Okay, so this is the contents of that HTML file, apparently. It begins with an OL tag, and it has a bunch of LI tags and that sort of thing. This is something that a programmer sat and typed up with HTML. Now let's see, what does it come out to in the browser? View page source. This does look different. It looks like somehow all this got added into there, because I see the OL starts over here on line 20. Not sure exactly what the story is with that. Let's see if this checks out. Readme.html looks like it has here we go. Yeah, that's where it seems to be starting from. And it starts from the words unzip the package in an empty directory and upload everything. Let's see, where do we find that text? Unzip the package in an empty directory and upload everything. So Itaka starts over here. Somehow, by some magic that I'm not entirely sure about at this moment, the top 20 lines get thrown in there somehow. But for whatever we could see right now in the file, it starts over here with this OL tag. Right, so here we are on the server. There's this readme.html file, and this is the contents of that readme.html file. So in our browser, when we request that page, letsbringmashiach.com /readme.html, we're putting out there an HTTP request saying, please get me that particular thing. letsbringmashiach.com /readme.html. That request is going out on the internet. It's reaching a server out there. And the server out there, right, it went inside of the server and it asked, okay, web server, deal with this. Someone is asking for letsbringmashiach.com /readme.html. Make some sense of it. So the web server says, sure, let me handle it. And it takes that request and it takes it apart piece by piece. Okay, it came to the right server. Yes, we're here. This is letsbringmashiach.com. What would you like? You would like /readme.html. Let me look up in my folder over here. The web server goes ahead and has a look. What do we have inside the folder? And it sees, yes, inside of the web folder of our Mashiach project, we have something called readme.html. So at this point, I'm just going to take readme.html itself as an HTML file and just copy that entire text that's inside of the HTML file, send it out there to the internet, and respond that back to where it came from. Okay, server, I got the response. I didn't even need the database in this particular instance. I just took a file, and I'm telling server, here, pass this back out onto the wire, send them this entire HTML file. Let's see if that actually, excuse me, looks that way. If we inspect the elements over here, and we go to the network tab, refresh the page, readme.html. This is what we requested out there from the internet. And this is what came back, a response. a response of content type text HTML. And you could see the actual text which came in there was a whole bunch of HTML. Again, I'm not sure how the top 20 line went in there. It must be configured something in the server over there to do that fancy stuff. But for all we saw in that file, it starts over here by this OL. And starting from this OL, all of the stuff is coming to the browser, and the browser is filling it in over here. This is, I think, where the OL starts, the ordered list, right? That's the numbered thing that we see over there, number 1, number 2, number 3. Here we go. This is where that OL came into the page. Okay, so this is one example, a simple example of requesting something from out on the internet, the server going into its files, rummaging around, trying to find where is this file that was requested. And in this case, all it did was it just took the file as is, copied out all the text that comes inside of that file and just stuffed it onto the wire out onto the internet. And we got that back into our browser, and our browser showed it to us. Okay, that's cool. What else can a web server do? Well, let's get a little bit more complicated. Let's have a look at index.php. Okay, so just for fun, let's try license.txt. Why not? License.txt. This is the contents of license.txt. Oh, I know where the 20 lines disappeared. I'm zoomed in over here, so we didn't see the top 20 lines. It doesn't start by the OL. I just have to scroll up and see the entire top of the page is right here. Okay, so the entire HTML page of the readme.html, this is where it is. It's just a file of text on the server, and it's being sent back out to the browser as HTML. All right, so that mystery is solved. Having said that, let's go just have a quick peek at also the license file. Here's how the license file starts. It starts with the word WordPress - web publishing software. I don't know if any of you guys ever heard of something called WordPress. It's a nice website system that exists out there with a lot of prepared cool stuff that you don't even have to spend hours and hours, weeks and months programming yourself. This WordPress thing already has a whole lot of cool things for you that you can just copy paste this entire zip file of a whole bunch of programming stuff and just put it into your web server, and magically you'll have a whole big functioning website already there that you can just go ahead and customize specifically how you want it to look and how you want it to behave. And this is the website system that I was using to make this, Let's Bring Mashiach website. So let's just quickly have a look at what the license text file looks like. License.txt. And here we go. It's just a plain, it doesn't even look so pretty anymore, you see? This isn't the HTML file that we requested. So it doesn't have fancy graphics and pretty buttons or colors or anything like that. This is just a text file. Exactly the text that we have in the file on the internet. That's what came through when we requested it out of the web server on the server over there. And I guess we're out of time here a little bit. So I didn't get into what PHP is exactly and what that means and how that makes things interesting for how the web server works. So I'm going to continue delving into that in Mirz Hashem next time. Let me just quickly recap if there's any last minute questions to address over here. Yes, you're right, YA. I hadn't scrolled up because I zoomed into the file and I was like, where is all the rest of the page on top? And it's like, it only starts by the OL. That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, you were right. I was just zoomed down and I had to just scroll up and see. What does PHP mean? Good question. We're going to get to that in Mirz Hashem next time. Sorry I couldn't cover it now, but that's going to help wrap up a little bit about how websites work, how the internet works, and how web pages that you are going to be programming works. And then from there, I'll show you guys, where to go next. As it's the last class already. So we're going to cover just a little bit more about how the web server works, how PHP files or other programming files work to make nice HTML pages, and how to connect to a database, how to get information out of a database a little bit, and wrap things up from there. Let's see if there's anything else over here. Top Baby Deal. How is Top Baby Deal getting and updating its deals? Yeah, that's a very good question. Let me finish off with that. We discussed today how your browser, your web browser, which is the client, which is like the customer of the internet, goes out there and asks from the servers, hey, please give me this, please give me that. Then we went into how your browser, from behind the scenes with JavaScript, could do those things as well. It could go behind the scenes while you're browsing a page and say, hey, internet, please give me this additional piece of information or that additional piece of information, and add that into the page. But in truth, the whole internet works this kind of way, with computers sending messages and receiving messages, asking for information and receiving information from each other. It doesn't only have to happen between a client and a server. It doesn't only have to happen between a computer, a device, a mobile phone, and a server out there on the internet. It could also happen between one server and another server. For example, if you're a server called marketwatch.com, or if you're a server called somethingweather.com, and you just want to show people the weather, you want to make nice pages that when people ask for the weather, you can show them, but you don't have weather stations, you don't have weather scientists that give you that, first source information. In fact, you are just copying that information from someone else. Someone else out there has a different server. Maybe they're a government agency, maybe they're a news agency, maybe they're a weather agency, and they do specialize in gathering weather information. They do specialize in making a database full of weather information, and they're sitting out there, either they're renting it or subscription for a price. You can get from them pieces of information to get from them for you to use on your website. So even though you don't have weather information, but you can get that by asking other servers. So you, as a server on the internet, as a website on the internet, you can ask another website on the internet for some information. You're like a client to another server. One server asking things from another server. Hey server, can you please give me a piece of the weather? Hey server, can you please give me the next tick of the number on the market? Can you please give me the next deal that's available from your deals website, and from this deals website, and from that deals website? So you can have a server on the internet that you programmed to go out there and ask from other people, from other sources on the internet, hey, please give me a piece of this, please give me a piece of that. So the only next thing to figure out is, which websites do you want to get deals from? If we looked at topbabydeal.com, where was that? Over here, you'll realize that this one comes from slickdeals.net. And this one comes from also slickdeals, hip2save.com. That's a different website. This one comes from slickdeals. This one comes from camelcamelcamel.com. So basically, I'm guessing Label went ahead and drew up a list of like 30 or 50 different websites where you can get good deals from. They have the actual deals, right? My website, Top Baby Deal, I don't have any deals. I don't know anything about deals. I'm not a deals place. I'm not e-commerce. I'm not selling things on the internet. I'm just a website that curates and wants to show you some nice deals. So I'm going to get a whole bunch of information from other websites. Hey, Slick Deals server, can you please give me the next latest deal that you have? Hey, Camel Camel, or hey, Hip2Save, give me your latest deals that you got, and I'm going to copy that information and show it on my website. This is, of course, all aside from the fact of copyright issues, and you can't just take stuff from other people and just resell it yourself. Different people have different subscription models, or you pay, or some people have free information. Some people want you to take their information so that you advertise their website. Look, from here, this website, you're going to click on it and you're going to end up on hip2save.com, and maybe they're happy about that. So each website might have a different arrangement of how it works to get their information, but this is hopefully to answer your question. How do we get deals information? It's because our server, who doesn't know anything about deals, goes out there and asks other servers on the internet, hey, can you please tell me about the latest deals that you have? I want to have a copy of that and show that to people that come visiting my website. So technically, people can go straight to slickdeals.com server and get the information from there. Or if they don't know about slickdeals.com, or they missed that deal, or they didn't know about it, but they came to your website, topbabydeal.com, that's another opportunity that they can get to find this deal because you borrowed it, you copied it, whatever it is, from another server on the internet. All right, we're a little bit over time here. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Hopefully this covered a little bit more about how the internet works, how web pages work by requesting them from servers, what servers go through to have to be able to serve people that are asking for stuff on the internet. Hopefully you also learned how you can ask for little pieces of information on the internet, even from JavaScript itself. Magically, behind the scenes, you are going to write functions like fetch or other things that we didn't get to, like jQuery, Ajax. If you ever heard the word Ajax, that's what it's all about. Ajax means asynchronous JavaScript and XML or something like that, which basically means the idea of going and getting information from servers on the internet using slick little functions that you can use to do that. And see you guys next time when we'll finally, hopefully, wrap things up more and send you guys on your way for where you can go next, what you can do to take things from here and go on, hopefully, for a successful career in programming. Thanks a lot again. Looking forward. We'll see you guys next time in Mirz Hashem.